The silence in that restaurant was so loud, I could hear the ice melting in my water glass. My grandson Brandon was still smirking. My son Richard was staring at his plate like it held the secrets to the universe. And my daughter-in-law Patricia, oh Patricia, she was smiling that tight little smile she always wears when she thinks she's won something. I had just finished telling them about my day, how I'd volunteered at the community center, how I'd helped organize the food drive for families who couldn't afford Thanksgiving dinner. Nothing special, just what I've always done. And then Brandon opened his mouth. "Grandma, why do you even bother with that stuff?" He was scrolling through his phone, barely looking at me. "Those people just take and take. You're not their savior. It's kind of embarrassing, honestly. You worked as a janitor your whole life. What do you know about success?" Richard chuckled nervously. Patricia reached over and patted her son's hand. "Brandon, be nice," she said, but she was smiling. She was actually smiling. Richard cleared his throat. "He's just stressed about college applications, Mom. You know how teenagers are." But I saw it, the way Patricia's eyes glittered with approval, the way my son couldn't meet my gaze, the way my grandson looked at me like I was something stuck to his shoe. "You don't understand, Grandma," Brandon continued, warming to his theme. "Dad works his tail off. He's a doctor. Mom's a doctor. They've built something, they've made something of themselves. And you're over here giving away pennies to strangers, when you should be grateful they let you live in that house." I set down my fork, very carefully. The metal touched the plate with a soft click. "Let me live? Come on, Mom." Richard finally looked up. "We've talked about this. That house is technically ours. We just let you stay there to be nice." I remember the cold spreading through my chest, the numbness that settled into my fingers, the strange, floating sensation of my entire world tilting sideways. Because that house, the one they claimed was theirs, was mine. I bought it with my own money. I cleaned floors for 25 years to pay off that mortgage. I scraped and saved and sacrificed while Richard was in medical school. I worked double shifts with bleeding feet so he wouldn't have to take out loans. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I looked at my grandson, at his expensive clothes, at his shiny new phone, at the future he was so sure he'd earned all by himself. "You're right, Brandon," I said quietly. "I was a janitor, but I did what I had to do for my family, and I kept a secret, for you." The smirk faltered, just for a second. The truth is, I had been saving something for my grandson, something special, something that would have changed his life. But in that moment, at that table, surrounded by the family I'd sacrificed everything for, I knew what I had to do. My name is Margaret O'Malley. I'm 68 years old, a widow, and a retired janitor. But before I was any of those things, I was just a girl from a small town in Ohio who fell in love with a boy who fixed cars. His name was Frank O'Malley. Big hands, bigger heart. The kind of man who could take apart an engine and put it back together while humming Irish folk songs. We met in 1976, married in 1978, and spent the next 47 years building a life together. Frank was a mechanic. A good one. The kind of mechanic who would look at a single mom's broke-down car and say, "Don't worry about it, honey. We'll figure something out." He didn't make a lot of money, but he made a lot of friends. And he made me happy. We had 2 children. Richard was the first, born in 1979, followed by my daughter Catherine in 1982. Catherine is the quiet one, the one who stayed close. She lives 3 towns over, runs a small bakery, and comes to visit me every Sunday with her daughter Sophie. Richard was always different. Ambitious, hungry. He was the kind of boy who wanted more than what we could give him. When he was 12, he told Frank he was going to be a doctor, and there was no stopping him after that. I started working as a janitor at the local elementary school in 1985. It wasn't glamorous. The pay was terrible, and the work was hard. But it gave me flexibility, which I needed with 2 kids at home. Frank worked at the garage, and I scrubbed floors and emptied trash cans. And somehow, we made it work. I was the one who got up at 4 in the morning to make Richard's breakfast before school. I was the one who stayed up late, helping him with his science projects. I was the one who scraped together money for tutoring, for books, for anything he needed to succeed. Frank always said, "He's got your brains, Maggie. That boy's going to be somebody someday." And he was right. Richard got into a good college. He got into medical school. He met Patricia there, a fellow med student from a wealthy family, and I could see the shift happening even then. When he introduced us, Patricia smiled politely and asked about my career. I told her I was a janitor, and she nodded, but I saw her eyes flick to Richard. There was something there, something she didn't say, but I felt it. She was disappointed. I wasn't what she expected. Patricia's family is old money. Her father was a surgeon. Her mother was a stay-at-home wife who ran the charity circuit. Patricia grew up with private tutors, summer houses, and a trust fund. She never had to scrape and save. She never had to wonder where her next meal was coming from. And Richard, who had been so humble as a boy, who had promised me he'd never forget where he came from, he fell right into her world. I watched my son change, slowly at first, like rust on metal. He started wearing better clothes. He started talking differently. He started looking at our house, at our furniture, at our lives, with a kind of embarrassment. When they got married in 2002, Patricia's family paid for the wedding, a big affair at a country club, 300 guests, champagne, lobster. I remember sitting at the parents' table, wearing the best dress I could afford, and feeling like an imposter, like I didn't belong there. And maybe that's exactly what Patricia wanted me to feel. The early signs were small, the kind of tiny cuts that you don't notice until you're bleeding. Patricia would invite us to dinner, and then forget to include us in the seating. She'd send Christmas cards that were addressed to Frank and Margaret, in handwriting that made the Margaret look smudged, almost like an afterthought. When Frank got sick in 2010, I remember Patricia saying, "Maybe it's time to think about assisted living." We were in the hospital cafeteria. Richard was at Frank's bedside. Patricia looked at me with those cold, calculating eyes and said, "You can't be expected to care for him. It's too much." I didn't respond. I just went back to Frank's room and held his hand, and pretended I hadn't heard her. Frank passed 3 months later, lung cancer. I sat with him every day until the end. Richard came sometimes, but he was always busy, always had surgeries, always had patients. I understood. I didn't blame him. But Patricia was already planning the funeral before Frank was even gone. "I think we should keep it small," she said. "Frank wasn't really a social person, was he?" Everybody in town knew Frank. But I just nodded, because I was too tired to fight. The funeral was small. Patricia's family came. Richard's medical colleagues came. Frank's friends from the garage were relegated to the back, like they didn't matter. And I sat there in the front row, watching them honor my husband, feeling like I was invisible. After Frank died, things got worse. Richard and Patricia had bought a large house in the suburbs. Beautiful place, 4 bedrooms, a swimming pool. Patricia's mother had a wing dedicated to her art collection. There was plenty of room for me. But I didn't want to move in. I wanted to stay in my house. The house I'd bought, the house where Frank and I had raised our children. It was small, sure, modest. The paint was peeling in the bathroom. But it was mine. It held our memories. Patricia didn't like that. "You can't stay there by yourself, Margaret," she said one Sunday afternoon. It was a year after Frank died. I had hosted a small dinner for Catherine and Sophie, and Richard and Patricia had come. "It's not safe. You're getting older. What if you fall?" "I can still walk, Patricia." "Don't be stubborn." She sighed, like I was a difficult child. "We've already discussed this. The house should go to Richard anyway. He's the oldest. He's the one who's going to take care of you." I looked at Richard. He was staring at the wall, refusing to meet my eyes. "Richard," I said, "what are you talking about? I bought this house." "I know, Mom," he sighed heavily, "but you're not going to live forever, and we need to think about the future. Patricia's right. It's not safe." They were planning to take my house, my home, the only thing I had left besides my memories. I should have fought them then. I should have stood up and said, "This is my house and you can't have it." But I was grieving. I was tired, and part of me still believed that my son would come to his senses. I was wrong. Over the next few months, Patricia came by more often. She'd make suggestions about decluttering. She'd point out things that were broken or old or not worth keeping. And gradually things started disappearing. A lamp from the living room, a painting that Frank's sister had given us, a silver serving platter that had been in my family for generations. "I donated them," Patricia said, when I asked. "You don't need all this junk, Margaret. It's just collecting dust." I started hiding things. Frank's watch, his wedding ring, his college sweatshirt. I kept them in a small box under my bed, where Patricia couldn't find them. But the worst part wasn't the things she took. It was the way Richard changed. He stopped visiting, stopped calling. When I phoned him, he was always busy, always had patience, always had something more important than his mother. The grandchildren, Brandon and his sister Emily, they were growing up without me. Brandon was the older one, 17 years old. Emily was 15, quiet and kind, more like Catherine's daughter Sophie. Brandon was Patricia's project. He had her ambition, her hunger for more. I remember when he was 10, he came to visit and played with the rag doll I'd made for him. Now he'd started to look at me with that same condescension his mother had. Like I was something ancient, something embarrassing. "You know, Grandma," he said once, "we have a cleaning lady at our house. She's foreign. She doesn't speak very good English." I looked at him, the boy I'd held as a baby, the boy I'd rocked to sleep, and I saw Patricia in his eyes. "What's your point, Brandon?" "I don't know," he shrugged. "It just makes me think about you." It would be so weird if my grandma was a janitor. I didn't have the heart to tell him. I didn't have the heart to tell my grandson that I'd cleaned toilets so his mother could buy those fancy clothes, that I'd scraped black mold from school bathroom tiles so his father could go to med school, that my hands were gnarled with arthritis because of all the work I'd done for them. I just smiled and said nothing, because that's what mothers do. We smile and we suffer, and we keep the secrets. It happened at the first dinner celebrating Brandon's early acceptance to Yale. Richard and Patricia had booked the fanciest restaurant in town, the kind of place where the menu didn't have prices, the kind of place where you had to wear a jacket. I wore my best dress, the one I'd bought for Catherine's wedding. It was modest, but it was clean, and I thought I looked nice. Patricia looked me up and down when I arrived. She didn't say anything. She just smiled that tight little smile and said, "So glad you could make it." The dinner was an ordeal. Patricia's parents were there, looking at me like I was a specimen under a microscope. Richard's colleagues from the hospital, Patricia's friends from the country club. And then there was me, Margaret O'Malley, the janitor's widow, seated at the end of the table like an afterthought. I could have handled all of that. I could have handled the condescending looks. I could have handled the snide remarks. I've been handling them my whole life. But then Brandon started talking about his future. "I'm going to be a surgeon," he said, his voice loud with arrogance. "I'm going to make more money than Dad. I'm going to have a house on the coast, a yacht, everything." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Patricia gushed. "You've always been so driven." "Drive is everything," Richard said. "It's what separates the successful from the unsuccessful." That was when I mentioned my volunteer work. I'd been thinking about it all day, how I'd helped a young family find food for Thanksgiving, how I'd watched the mother cry tears of joy. "I met a lovely woman today," I said. She was so grateful. She had 3 kids and no food for the weekend. I was able to get her connected with the right resources. Then Patricia laughed. A short, brittle sound. "Well, how nice of you to play the saint, Margaret." But it was Brandon who delivered the killing blow. "Grandma, why do you even bother with that stuff?" He was scrolling through his phone, barely looking at me. "Those people just take and take. You're not their savior. It's kind of embarrassing, honestly. You worked as a janitor your whole life. What do you know about success?" "Brandon, be nice," Patricia said, but she was smiling. Richard chuckled. "He's just stressed about college applications, Mom. You know how teenagers are." But I saw it. I saw Patricia's eyes glitter with approval. I saw Richard's refusal to meet my gaze. I saw Brandon's smirk. "You don't understand, Grandma," Brandon continued. "Dad works his tail off. He's a doctor. Mom's a doctor. They've built something. They've made something of themselves. And you're over here giving away pennies to strangers when you should be grateful they let you live in that house." I set down my fork. Very carefully, the metal touched the plate with a soft click. "Let me live?" "Come on, Mom." Richard finally looked up. "We've talked about this. That house is technically ours. We just let you stay there to be nice." The room seemed to tilt. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands began to shake, and I was grateful they were hidden under the table. I thought of all the nights I'd come home with aching feet, all the weekends I'd worked double shifts, the house I'd scrimped and saved for, the house where I'd raised my son. "You're right, Brandon," I said quietly. "I was a janitor, but I did what I had to do for my family, and I kept a secret. For you." The smirk faltered, just for a second. "What secret?" Patricia's voice was sharp. "What are you talking about?" I pushed my chair back and stood. "I'm going to go," I said. "I don't feel very well." "But Grandma," Brandon started. Enjoy your dinner, I said. Enjoy your future, Brandon. You've earned it. I walked away from that table. I walked past the hostess, past the valet, past the fancy cars in the parking lot. I walked all the way home. It was 6 miles. My feet were killing me, but I didn't cry. I don't cry. When I got home, I went straight to my bedroom. I pulled out the small wooden box from under my bed, the one with Frank's watch, his ring, his college sweatshirt. But I didn't stop there. Underneath the box was a floorboard that I'd pried loose years ago. Frank had helped me hide things there. Important things. Things we didn't want anyone to find. I pulled out the false bottom and reached into the dark space beneath. The envelope was still there, thick, yellowed, sealed with tape. I'd almost forgotten about it. Almost. I sat on my bed and opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a piece of paper, folded carefully. It was a will, Frank's will, but not just any will. It was the will he'd written 5 years before he died. The one he'd told me about in the hospital. The one I promised to keep safe. I started reading. To my beloved wife, Margaret. If I pass before you, I want you to know that I took care of you. I know I never earned much money. I know we never had the luxuries that Richard and Patricia have. But I promised you when we got married that you'd always be safe, and I kept that promise. In 2003, I had an old friend approach me. A man named Danvers. He was a stockbroker and he had a tip about a company that was going to change the world. He was one of the few people who believed in me, and I believed in him. I took every penny I had. I sold everything I could. I put it all into that company. I know it was a risk. I know you would have stopped me if you'd known. But I had to do something. I had to make sure you were secure. I put the shares in your name, Margaret. All of them. The company is called Dynamic Tech Solutions. When you read this, it might be worth a lot of money, or they might be worth nothing. Either way, they're yours. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I wanted to surprise you. I wanted to see the look on your face when you found out you were rich. But cancer came first. Take care of yourself, Maggie. And take care of our children. Even Richard, even when he doesn't understand. I sat there holding the letter. Dynamic Tech Solutions. I remembered that name vaguely. From years ago. A tech company. Something about computers. But I wasn't interested in computers. I was interested in my grandson. The grandson who had called me a leech. The grandson who was about to go to Yale. Because here's the thing I hadn't told him. Here's the secret I'd been carrying for years. Frank had left those shares to me, yes. But I'd never touched them. I'd never needed to. I'd made my own way. I'd worked my own job. I'd saved my own money. And I'd been planning to give them to Brandon. All of them. The whole portfolio. Worth over $100,000. Maybe more. I'd been going to the lawyer's office the next day. I'd been going to sign the papers transferring the stocks to my grandson. A graduation gift. A life-changing gift. Enough to pay for Yale. Enough to start his life on Easy Street. But that was before. That was before he called me a leech. Before he said I was embarrassing. Before he made it clear I was just a burden to him. I stared at the letter. At Frank's handwriting. At his love. His sacrifice. And I made a decision. I slept poorly that night. Or maybe I didn't sleep at all. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Frank. About Brandon. About Richard, my son, who had looked at me across a fancy table and told me that my house was technically theirs. I thought about all the years I'd worked. All the years I'd sacrificed. All the years I'd believed that family was everything. And I thought about the janitor I'd seen at the law office. The man who had smiled at me in the elevator. The man who had held the door open for me. The man who had said, "Have a blessed day, ma'am." I hadn't known him at the time. He was just another janitor. Another person doing the same work I'd done for 25 years. Another person being looked down on by the world. I didn't know his name. I didn't know his story. But I knew his job. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I called my lawyer. Her name is Susan Reeves, and she's been handling my affairs for years. She's the one who helped me manage Frank's estate. The one who knew about the stocks. The one who'd been waiting for my call. "Margaret," she said, her voice warm and professional. "How are you doing? I was expecting your call yesterday to finalize the stock transfer." "I need to change the plan, Susan." My voice was steady, calm. "The money isn't going to Brandon anymore." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Are you sure, Margaret? You've been planning this for years." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." I told her everything, the dinner, the humiliation, the words Brandon had said. The way Richard had looked at me like I was nothing. I want it to go to something different, I said. Something that matters, something that makes a difference. What did you have in mind? Local janitors, I said. The ones who work here in town. The ones nobody sees, the ones nobody thanks. I want to start a scholarship fund. For their children. For the children of people who work hard, but don't get recognized. Susan was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "That's unusual, Margaret. But I can make it happen." While I was on the phone with Susan, the doorbell rang. I looked out the window and saw a sleek black car in my driveway. Patricia's car. I sighed and hung up the phone. "Susan, I have to go. Let me know when the paperwork's ready." "You're doing the right thing, Margaret." I wasn't sure about that. All I knew was that I couldn't give my money to a boy who saw me as garbage, who saw my life's work as worthless, who thought he was better than me because he'd been born with a silver spoon and a trust fund. I opened the door. Patricia was standing on my porch, her face flushed with anger. Richard was behind her, looking uncomfortable. Brandon was in the car, scrolling through his phone. "Margaret," Patricia said, pushing past me into the house. "What did you mean last night? What secret were you talking about?" "I'm not discussing this right now." "Yes, you are." She spun around, her eyes blazing. "You think you have something, some inheritance, some money. But I've been through all your papers. I know what you have and what you don't have. There's nothing." "Then why are you here?" "I'm here because I want to know what you're up to. You embarrassed us last night." "He's worked so hard. And you mean I worked so hard," I said quietly. "I worked so hard so you could have everything you wanted. But you never saw me. None of you ever saw me." "You're a janitor," Patricia spat. "You were a janitor. That's not work. It's survival," I said. "And it's what put your husband through medical school. It's what paid for your wedding. It's what made your life possible." Richard stepped forward, his face pale. "Mom, I never—" "Leave," I said. "All of you, leave." I was surprised by the strength in my voice, the calm, the power I'd had all along but had never used. "We're not leaving until you explain," Patricia said. I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could, my phone rang. Susan's name flashed on the screen. "Excuse me," I said. "I need to take this." I walked into the kitchen, leaving Patricia and Richard standing in my living room. "Margaret," Susan said, her voice urgent. "You're not going to believe this. I found something Frank didn't tell you. There's a second account." "A second account?" "Frank had a secondary trust, for Richard and Catherine. He named you as the executor, but there's a provision in it. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of no matter what. If you ever felt like you were being mistreated, you're authorized to redirect the funds. All of them." I felt the blood rush to my head. "Redirect them?" "To anyone you choose," Susan said. "It was Frank's secret. He knew Richard's wife was difficult. He wanted you to have options." I looked out the window at the black car, at Brandon scrolling through his phone, at Patricia who was rummaging through my papers. My options. I had so many options. The next few weeks were a blur. I met with Susan and signed the papers. We transferred the stocks. We created the scholarship fund. We did everything legally, above board, exactly as Frank would have wanted. I didn't tell Richard. I didn't tell Patricia. I didn't tell anyone. But Patricia knew something was wrong. She could feel it in the air, the same way a shark smells blood in the water. She called me every day, texted me, showed up at my house unannounced. "You're hiding something, Margaret," she said one afternoon. "I can tell. You're up to something." "I'm not up to anything," I said. "I'm just living my life." "You're not going to get away with this, whatever this is." I didn't respond. I just smiled and closed the door. The day came when I had to tell Richard. He showed up alone, without Patricia, without Brandon. He looked tired, defeated. He sat down at my kitchen table and stared at his hands. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. "Something's going on with the estate. The lawyer called. There's been some kind of transfer." "Yes," I said. "I know." He looked up, his eyes wide. "What did you do?" "I'm going to ask you a question, Richard," I said. "And I want you to answer honestly." He nodded slowly. "Were you ever going to let me keep this house?" The silence stretched between us like a rubber band, about to snap. We talked about it," he said finally. "Patricia thought it was for the best. For your safety. We were going to put you in a nice facility, somewhere with nurses, somewhere you'd be taken care of. I don't need to be taken care of, I said. I took care of myself for 68 years. I took care of you. I didn't need to be put anywhere. I know, Mom. I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough. I stood up. You didn't just hurt me, Richard. You showed me what you really thought of me, what you really believed. And what you believed was that I wasn't worth anything, that my life didn't matter, that the work I did was worthless. That's not true. Isn't it? I took a deep breath. I was going to give your son $100,000. I had it set aside for his education, for his future. I was going to change his life. Richard's face went white. What? The stocks Frank left me, they were worth more than I thought. I was going to give them to Brandon, so he could go to Yale, so he could have everything he wanted. Mom. But he called me a leech, I said. He said I was embarrassing. He made it clear that I'm just a burden to him. So I'm not giving him the money. I'm giving it to someone who actually deserves it. Who? Richard's voice cracked. Who are you giving it to? The son of the janitor at the law office, I said. His father works the same job I did for 25 years. He works twice as hard and gets half the respect. His son is smart. His son is good. His son gets to go to college. You can't do that, Richard said, standing up. That's our money. That's family money. Frank left it to me, I said calmly. I'm legally allowed to do whatever I want with it. And I'm choosing to honor the work I did. The work that put you through medical school. The work you're so ashamed of. Richard was shaking. Tears were streaming down his face. I'd never seen him cry before. Not once in his entire adult life. Mom, please, I'll fix this. I'll make Brandon apologize. I'll tell Patricia. It's too late, I said. The papers are signed. The money's gone. It's going to a scholarship fund for the children of janitors. Your son can apply like everyone else. He stared at me like he'd been punched in the gut. Get out, Richard, I said. You're not welcome here anymore. Not until you understand what you did. Not until you understand who I am and what I sacrificed for you. He left without a word. I heard his car start, heard the tires screech as he drove away. And I sat down at my kitchen table and let myself cry for the first time in years. I wasn't crying because I was sad. I wasn't crying because I was angry. I was crying because I was free. It's been 6 months since that dinner. 6 months since I stood up from the table and walked away from everything I thought I knew. 6 months since I gave away $100,000 to a stranger. I still live in the house I bought with my own hands. The house that Patricia tried to take. The house that Richard claimed was theirs. I still go to the community center. I still help the families who can't help themselves. But things are different now. I got a letter from the janitor's son a few months ago. His name is Miguel, and he's 19 years old. He'd been working at a fast food restaurant to save money for community college. When he got the news about the scholarship, he cried. He's going to State University now, studying engineering. He sent me a photo of himself in front of the engineering building, holding a sign that said, "Thank you, Mrs. O'Malley." I keep that photo on my refrigerator, right next to the photos of my daughter Catherine and my granddaughter Sophie. Catherine visits me every Sunday. She doesn't know about the money. She doesn't care about the money. She brings me fresh bread from her bakery, and we drink tea, and we talk about Sophie's school. Sophie is 14 now, and she wants to be an artist. She wants to paint murals on buildings. I told her that's a wonderful dream, because it is. Richard tried to call me once. I let it go to voicemail. He left a long, rambling message about how he was sorry, how Patricia was sorry, how Brandon was sorry. He said they missed me. He said they wanted to see me. I haven't called him back. I will eventually. He's my son. I'll always love him. But I need him to understand that love isn't a given. It's earned. It's built. It's the product of years of trust and honesty and respect. And he hasn't earned it yet. Not yet. Patricia stopped calling after the first month. I heard through the grapevine that she's been telling people I'm mentally unstable, that I'm losing my mind, that I don't know what I'm doing. I don't care. I know who I am. I know what I did. And I know it was the right thing. Brandon sent me a text message last week. Just a simple message. "Grandma, I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said." I wrote back, "I know you didn't, but you said it anyway. Words have consequences." I don't know if he's really sorry. I don't know if he understands the weight of what he said. But maybe someday he will. Maybe someday he'll realize that the woman he called a leech was the woman who sacrificed everything for him. Maybe someday he'll be a better person than I saw at that dinner table. You're stronger than you know. I am, Frank. I'm stronger than I ever knew. The money I gave away wasn't really mine. It was Frank's. It was a gift from a man who loved me more than anything. And I used it to honor the work I did. The work he was so proud of. The work that nobody else respected. But I respect it. And now so does Miguel. So does his family. So does the world. And that's enough. That's more than enough. I still work at the community center. I still help the families who can't help themselves. I still wake up every morning and make my coffee and watch the sunrise. But now I do it with peace, with contentment, with the knowledge that I made the right choice. The family that hurt me is still out there. They're still rich. They're still successful. They still have their beautiful house and their fancy cars and their country club membership. But they don't have me. And I don't need them. I've got myself. I've got my dignity. I've got the knowledge that I did what I had to do. And I've got Miguel's photo on my refrigerator. His smile, his hope, his future. I gave his father $100,000, but really, I gave it to myself. I gave myself the gift of knowing I didn't become bitter. I didn't become cruel. I didn't turn into Patricia. I turned into someone better, someone stronger, someone who can look at the world and say, I am a janitor, and I am proud of who I am. I want to tell you something, whoever you are, something I've learned over the years. The world is going to try to break you. The world is going to tell you that you're not enough, that you're too poor, too old, too weak, too invisible. The world is going to try to make you believe that your work doesn't matter. But it does. Every floor you scrub, every toilet you clean, every piece of garbage you throw away, every family you help, every person you smile at, every small kindness you offer. It matters. It matters more than a trust fund, more than a country club membership, more than a house with a swimming pool. It matters because you matter, and I want you to remember that. I want you to remember that you are not a leech. You are not a burden. You are not invisible. You are a person, a beautiful, valuable person, and no one can take that away from you. Not your children, not your grandchildren, not your in-laws, not the world. I learned that lesson the hard way. I learned it at a dinner table, surrounded by people who should have loved me, who decided instead to humiliate me. I learned that I am stronger than I ever believed, and so are you. So stand up, walk away, and don't look back. The money will come and go, the houses will change hands, the cars will get old, but your dignity, your sense of self, the person you've worked so hard to become, that lasts forever. I'm Margaret O'Malley. I'm a widow. I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother. I'm a retired janitor. And I'm proud of every single thing I've ever done. Every floor I scrubbed, every toilet I cleaned, every child I helped, every sacrifice I made. I wouldn't change a thing.